Hello. Welcome to the Exatos.
SyncTank.
Oh yeah, it's true. Yeah, it's me. How's it going? There's Raph.
Welcome, everybody. Well, this is Andreas Exertus' SyncTank. I was just checking on the credits. Almost nobody is here who's announced, but still, it is the Wizard of Oz today. But since Andreas is here, I'll let you take it away. Welcome.
No,
everybody.
I think it's way funny. Baptize me, bro. Here's the thing I was gonna say though, because I called the title Oz's Strength originally, thinking that David was gonna make it. But get this, there's a literal tornado in California, right? And so I feel like that's crazy. 80-mile-an-hour winds are knocking over David's house and mine. So
It's a
The
Twister.
ultimate sync.
it's and we just talked about Twister. So Alex, you remember that kind of came up last time we talked. So I think there's at the very least, even if it's not a full Oz episode, we have to talk a little bit about what Oz is, and also how we're still in Kansas, or what that means to you. Are we still in Kansas? And so, what is the Wizard of Oz? Start with that.
It's a
First
movie.
Matrix.
Everyone's got a level of it, right? I actually agreed with all that. It's a movie, it's a book, and it's what the Matrix is based on. That's what I get. I'll give you that. It's the Matrix.
The
To me, it's
first
the
Matrix.
explanation of the Federal Reserve. That's my favorite interpretation
Really?
of it. Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate on that? I don't remember that one. I want to hear that version.
So there's two theories that are closely related, and it's basically a cross between the Federal Reserve and the populist movement. So the idea was that follow the yellow brick road meant follow the gold standard, stay on the gold standard, and that the greenbacks represented the illusions of Emerald City, and the opiate of the masses was going to be this fiat currency. And then you had like the Tin Man that kind of represented another amalgamation of that sort of fiat currency. But that's one of my favorite versions of it. There's a lot of other ones. It
Or
represents
silver.
feminism and all kinds of stuff. But I
So-
absolutely love the Federal Reserve take on it.
Since I'm probably the one who knows the least about all of this, I just finally, woe is me, watched the first half of it, like skipped through it. And what I just noted is like 70% of the lines they said, I had already heard. And I was like, oh my God, like what cultural impact did this movie have on everything? So, yeah.
And you just started watching that, like, you're the most recent person to have seen this movie, probably. And so I
just
wonder
watched it
for
an hour
you,
ago, but with Dark to the Moon sinking.
really?
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go. So wait, Raph, you were watching it normal soundtrack. Jim, you were watching it with
my
Dark Side.
Nana. She'd never heard Pink Floyd's Dark Side, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna go to this podcast. They gotta watch Wizard of Oz. Let's check it out. And I couldn't find it on YouTube for free. And I was like, but I know Dark Side of the Rainbow. So I was
That's
like, this will be
amazing.
dope. She dug it. The Federal Reserve thing is crazy. That obviously is all. Was that because of the book or the film?
The book. And then, I mean, obviously the film.
Well, the book was written before the Federal Reserve.
Well, the book was
1907
written on the
though,
side of the
Richard.
populist side, so there was already some sways towards bimetallic currency and fiat currency. So the concept of greenbacks and the gold standard was still somewhat of a topic debate. So the Federal Reserve is kind of a stand-in for the populist movement.
I can totally see that. The more you say that, because just the time itself, they're saying, "Hey, be careful what's coming. Be careful for the crash. Be careful for the Federal Reserve." I mean, when is the first Wizard of Oz book? Is it before?
It's 1900.
Yeah, and then
and Federal Reserve is 1913 essentially.
But there's also the 1907 conversation, which really like before 1913, they're planning it with like the mini depression in 1907. And so but then again, you've had communists in the 1890s that are saying, okay, we need to centralize our economy again, even though it was successful to get it out of the hands of the Federal Reserve in the 19th century from Andrew Jackson. Now is the time to use that power to create a more powerful economy. And then it gets usurped directly. What about the wizard, though? I mean,
I think the silver and gold thing is super important, and in the overall symbolism too. And I think there might have been a lot, especially on like the Hollywood level, perhaps related to that symbolism. But I think if we're to go with the author being a druidic theosophist, which is the closest thing I could find to.
I mean, that's what he identified as. You're using correct pronouns. Keep going.
Right.
Card carrying. Druidic order.
At least a theosophist, a serious one. I just don't think that it ends at that. I don't think it ends at the Federal Reserve thing. It could totally be a major conscious part of it. Like I said, especially by the time it was a film.
The Shining has a similar interpretation where the gold room is a symbol of gold currency and the creation of the Federal Reserve. So this is another example of like kind of an archetypal underlying narrative that's infiltrating movies somehow.
And that the Federal Reserve is definitely just my favorite one. I don't think it's necessarily the most plausible, but I think
a lot of sense.
It makes sense. It might sink in a lot of ways too. So the gold, you think about Masonic gold, Rosicrucian gold, the idea of the Knights Templar gold. Why gold? Why is gold? I mean, the Chinese wanted to use jade, right? So why is gold the of all the materials we could use, cobalt, right? Why is gold the one that we're saying we have to back our economy by? And I can't help but also tie that to why is occult practices practiced by the top level business executives like JP Morgan and the people at the time.
Well, the common answer, is because it has all the right properties, and it does have the right properties for money, but it also has like deeper properties, probably alchemical.
Are there any convincing arguments for cobalt and jade to replace gold? Because it seems like gold will be far more malleable than either of those.
Yeah, it's just better.
Jade's really fascinating, though. I mean, the value of jade isn't in that it can be transmuted necessarily, but that it can retain and store like in the glassy composition of the stone. I mean, it was used for dog tags, essentially. Everyone had their identity attached to their piece of jade. And yes, gold is used often, you can put it on, you keep it like it's valuable, right? So it almost feels like, does that make gold a fuel? A lot of people in the Ormus community say gold is meant to be eaten. Almost specifically.
Well, that's what the Zechariah Sitchin kind of scenario is, that we're all secretly mining gold for some off-world entity that likes to eat it,
Wizards of
draws
Oz
power
from
it,
or whatever.
But the Federal Reserve thing applies too for the Michael Jackson remake of called The Wiz, where the Emerald City is the World Trade Center, Twin Towers. Which is just hilarious. I mean, Is
that Common as was there a remake featuring Common, or was that just like a photo shoot?
No, that's a movie. Have you seen it? The Wiz, 1978.
It's I've seen The Wiz 1978, but I haven't seen the one with Common in it.
Which was a remake recently.
Yeah, this is from NBC.com.
Oh, okay.
The live version of The Wiz. It was like an homage.
I mean, I'm overanalyzing here, but I just love this outfit. I definitely want that.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, if I've ever seen the Eye of Providence from the back of a dollar bill, it's plastered all over him right here. Looking at me.
Right.
And it ties in with the Dark Side of the Moon album.
So I know I brought this up with Andreas before. I just sent the link in chat. This Road to Ruta document from the Boston Fed also kind of reminds me of that story. And I think I'm not sure if it has like a yellow brick road, but it's also basically a archetypal story by the Boston Fed, supposedly relating this idea that, oh, we have to go back, you know, to the rainbow or make the world colorful again. And this supposedly also relates to going back to a gold standard. And
Oh, I know
yeah,
that guy.
yeah.
Roger Ruda. Yeah.
I mean, there's a guy for it, but he just used the name of this comic, which he based his
okay.
theory on, that the basic thing is that ever since Alan Greenspan took over the Fed, I believe, with all the IT stuff, that it's a completely artificial system. Probably has been before, but of course with IT you can do literally anything.
Greenspan.
And just to throw a little bit of shade back on
Greenspan.
gold, because it's not the ultimate, right? Until I think I'm gonna get the number wrong, but I think until like the 1990s or 80s, the literal Rothschild family set the price of gold every morning, like at the open of business.
So you just be like, 20% more today. I feel like would be good. Just kind of random, whatever they want. It's nice. Well, the Wizard of Oz has a lot of qualities to it beyond just value, right? And it's kind of interesting because of the veiled idea of there's material value and there's spiritual value on either side. So you could see that there's Kansas, but Kansas and Oz are shifted realities essentially. So gold existing in both realities and the people who run both realities. And they kind of talk about the pompous nature of the elite, but she deals mostly with bureaucrats in the real world until she ends up in Oz. And in Oz, she constantly is running into bureaucrats of Oz, people that are lying, or in the book especially telling her that they're the tallest midget or dwarf or little person or whatever the deal is. Like they're inverses of themselves. There's a lying frog who uses only quadrisyllabic or polysyllabic words, can't use single syllabic words. I mean, all these characters. There's a kid who got lost in Oz because he was in a fire in California during the earthquake and he'd been educated. So he knew he couldn't, he was in a fire in a building and he was trying to climb down a ladder. He knew from being educated, he can't climb down. So he couldn't climb down the ladder because of his education. And he ended up in Oz, right? And this is the kind of story also, is that our reality is this Atlas Shrugged kind of world that's pushing out common sense into Oz. And that Oz is this, it seems crazy to our world, but that's because our world's falling apart and it's trying to deny the obvious natural order that's emerging out of chaos. And Oz seems to be flexible and able to handle and tolerate the differences of person.
Well said.
So, I mean, obviously there's the Federal Reserve angle here. We're kind of tripping on here. I haven't even seen The Wiz. I know of Michael Jackson in it, right? Is it Diana Ross too?
Yeah, right. I forget who's in The Wiz.
It's cool. I mean, I don't know.
Get on down the road.
All good, yeah, exactly. That's the song I do know. It feels like though there's like multiple levels of resolution of maps, to kind of paraphrase a Peterson thing, where it's like, all right, any good quality archetypal thing is going to be able to, we're going to be able to like hang coats on multiple levels of it. So clearly there are resonances and syncs, if you want to put it that way, of the Federal Reserve. I'd never even heard that, though it's cogent enough where I'm like, I believe that's an applicable framework to see it through. What are some of the alchemical things? Like, what are some things that might be even more archaic outside of the Federal Reserve model, though we can hang on the Federal Reserve model for a while if you guys want to? I'm just thinking there's got to be more ways to cut the.
And I think that's why the Wizard of Oz is such a long-lasting story, is because almost like, you know, the Bible 7 seals, where you have to be able to read it through 7 different lenses to understand it. I almost think the Oz fits as a perfect template for that. You know, you can put all sorts of different beliefs and theories on top of it, and it caters so well to it because it's not just the hero's journey, but like you mentioned, it's got all these alchemical properties, and it literally has, you know, opium in it, so there's drugs in it, there's all sorts of different actual properties of, you know, different materials, and not even to mention the archetypes that are introduced to it. So I've heard some alchemical, but I'm interested if you guys got anything specific.
I, as a kid, read all of the Oz books and didn't just watch the movie. So it's also kind of different. If you think, for instance, you know, like the ruby slippers are in the movie because it's Technicolor, but it was silver slippers originally. So there's things that back up the gold silver standard. But there's also other things like the Gnome King and the jewels and the stones, which is why I, you know, for instance, interested in the jade. But there's even more. For instance, the first book is about building a theosophical society that's order out of chaos. The second book is about rejecting Madame Blavatsky, because Frank Baum realizes that theosophy is an internal pursuit. Krishnamurti is kind of distracted by the hypocrisy in the church as well, or in the group. And so he says, okay, you know who is Ozma? I am Ozma. And so the second book, Ozma of Oz, is all about this little boy, himself, looking for Ozma, and eventually finds out that the little boy was the product of a spell that turned Ozma into a little boy to hide it. So he has to lose ego death himself and become the princess, right? So it's this transmutation, transfiguring, Hermes Trismegistus, it's transgender, it's all of it all at once. And that's just the second book, right? And then it continues on. You've got all these different characters along the way that you run into. But the biggest thing is the hypocrisy of inconfidence. So everyone,
how many books were there?
At least
14.
not. Yeah, there's like 14.
Jesus Christ, that's like a series.
It's a big part of my wall, yeah. But the thing is that he didn't want to write the last several books, and I think even I don't know if he wrote the final book or if it was a collection of parts that he'd put together that he was afraid people wouldn't like, and so he finally published. Because for a long time he was worried that if he published something that was not acceptable by the society, that he'd lose everything. So the most intense stuff, I think, is the 8th, 9th books. Really, is when he starts to really push to show what he's saying about the hypocrisy of society, the hypocrisy of bureaucracy, how everything's falling apart, but also the magic of theosophy, what he's saying people need to do to become themselves, to self-realize. And they have to realize that their entire persona is a mask that is magical, and that it's being propelled by our own wish to not be discovered for who we really are. And so that's the point of almost every character in The Wizard of Oz, is they're constantly carrying ego that's deflecting who they really are. And then this little girl is able to astutely discover what's really going on. The other thing is you find out eventually that Toto can talk. He just refuses to. And that's another thing, because Toto is this sort of Thoth-like figure, or Anubis, this little black dog who is kind of a tulpa. I don't know if you've got a better word. There's someone suggested a better word for this, but it's very interesting that she has this little black dog who's also the Scottish Terrier, and the Scottish Terrier symbolism to Highland magic and the occult. This is her.
OTO.
Right. It's the monolith.
Toto.
Yeah, Toto is the monolith, right?
Toto is the monolith.
Also,
End episode.
like a somewhat serious, like Sirius B or whatever. I think there might be something about him sharing the Theosophical Society with Alice Bailey, and wanting to represent maybe the Golden Bridge or whatever, as like the bridge between Earth or the astral, or I don't know, like the whole moving into the Age of Aquarius thing, like Rainbow Bridge and Death and Sephiroth. I don't know. I think that the first thing I came up with was like that it was the first Matrix kind of movie to be sold to us, because it was just the first time we were seeing like a man behind the curtain in like a mass produced, or mass consumed rather, piece of media. I think it was the first time we saw like the Dark City Truman Show sort of impulse that would come out later in film. But I don't know, I think that if you keep looking at it like through a sort of occult lens, you can see him putting more theosophical stuff kind of hidden in there. I found a whole bunch of stuff like in the breakdown of the words or whatever that somebody had just made a video of, but this guy at Yoga Institute was basically enforcing this thing to me, that it was exactly what Fritz Springmeier talks about, and we could talk about him in a second, as far as it being used as a mind control script. And even if that's a little too much, I think it certainly is.
Really? We're not in Kansas anymore is too much for mind control? I feel like that's exactly where we go, but keep going, sorry.
It's okay.
Yeah, I've got a theory on that.
Lost me place.
Well,
Bummer.
It
I-
doesn't matter.
Well, just to jump off that, I mean, I think I talked last time I was here about my whole thing about Wisconsin and how, Sidney Gottlieb and Frank Olson and many other people who were involved with the MK Ultra program were educated in Wisconsin, the University of Madison, Wisconsin. And there's just a lot of stuff and weird stuff in Wisconsin that makes me think that it's kind of a locus or something for that kind of activity. And so it's no surprise that The Wizard of Oz, the film, the world premiere was in Wisconsin. They had a whole run of screenings in August 1939 in Wisconsin, which is just kind of weird and random. But O'Connell Walk. Before releasing wide to the whole country on August 25th, which was the 237th day of the year, and then Hitler invaded Poland 6 days later or whatever. So World War II started. And so what I wanted to bring up about The Wizard of Oz is sort of about the timing of not only the release of that movie, but some other versions and the book, which was published in 1900, kind of like a kicking off of the 20th century kind of thing, like an inaugural piece of media. And then I just learned the other day that I knew that there's several silent film versions that they made, but one of them was called The Patchwork Girl of Oz, and it came out in August 1914, which was like almost exactly concurrent with the start of World War I. So that's like three kind of examples of like this story inaugurating or kicking off the 20th century and the highlights or lowlights or whatever.
The other fun one for me is
Wisconsin.
IBM. Oh, I just want to quickly say, because this is, I think you all know this one, but obviously HAL, the letter
over one letter.
I, then the B, and then M, LM, AB, HI, IBM, HAL. So do that with Oz, right? So MNNO
P.
Y. So you have NY for New York, right? And the idea of New York, NOYZ. So Oz is just shifted from Oz. Yeah, the other way around.
Yeah.
And so there's a masculine, feminine inversion, but also the idea of 237 days or weeks, I think you said, or was it days?
The 237th day of the year.
That's just
released.
Too fun to ignore. And I like this because, Frank Bauman said, it was just, I was looking around the room and I saw the filing cabinet and it was O through Z. So I named it. It's very much like that Family Guy story where,
or the usual suspects.
Griffin. Yeah. Remember, he's like Peter Griffin's looking around the room. He's like, "What's my name?" It's P. Tier Griffin. Oh no, he actually calls himself who he really is, like the self.
If you kind of pay attention next time you go out to eat or to any kind of small little container of salt or maybe a can of something, and it says 8 Oz, and then it for ounces, but then in parentheses it says 237 milliliters.
Jesus Christ.
That's really common. So it's just something that makes me laugh every time I see it.
It's the beginning of the Yellow Brick Road on the Lowry's symbol.
So the very first thing that came to my mind when I, of course, heard them talk and mention the Yellow Brick Road, I sent another link in the private chat, Andreas, which was the only sample I could find quickly, because I know in Austria there's quite a few, main squares and so on, where they use these kind of bricks. And I think, but this was too long ago when I wasn't up to speed on all of that. And I just asked, like, what is this? And they kind of said, yeah, the emperor made it, the last emperor of Austria or something made streets like this.
Yeah.
And exactly. And I really wonder, like, I don't know, maybe they are old world plastering or something, or I don't know what, but they are particular stones. They are yellow, certainly. And they are apparently on different type of main squares in Austria, for example, still to this day.
It's like the original prototype of the Shining carpet.
Yeah, the idea of geometry. Now I have to wonder more about that, because this also reminds me kind of the Gamadian and Swazi or something as well, like the broken.
Oh my! Actually, the way it's done here, exactly. You're right.
It's also got that like stair step look to it, and another name for that the theosophical path is called the Golden Path or the Golden Stairway.
I googled the Akanamwaka or whatever, Wisconsin, where this film was premiered,
Yeah.
that means gathering of the waters, which I don't know if that
Ooh.
matters or not. But what you were saying, it seems like this kind of resonates at epochs of huge shifts within the collective unconscious, which psychoanalysis was kind of popping at that point. Harder.
Let's check out the map as well. Speaking of gathered waters, right? Because we, was it the Witch of the North is originally the Witch of the South. Isn't that right? And then they've made her the Witch of the North for the movie, but in the book
Well, there
it
was
the
two
Witch of the South.
witches in the book. There was two witches, two good witches rather.
Right. One of them has red hair. One's got black hair. One has blonde hair. One has white hair, but looks the youngest of them all. Something to that effect.
There's only 3.
No, there's northeast, southwest,
Yeah,
and then
okay,
the Witch of the
cardinal
East
directions.
dies. Yeah. So there's this Masonic court kind of thing going on here,
Yeah.
where you have, to bow to the east, you have to bow to the west, bow to the south, the north, and the north is the north and the south have to do with the chronicler. What's it called? The master warden or whatever. The Grand Master. Thomas, help me out here. What's it? What are they
I'm
called?
not allowed to say. So you've got the worshipful master, and then you've got your deacons and your wardens.
Yeah, worshipful master. I'm sorry. Don't put you on the spot. But okay, I'll go back to that map actually in a second. I'm gonna save it. But I wanted to go to the second one.
Oh, that picture you just had too, talking about the Masonic pillars on the left and right, right?
Right. So you've got your pillars, and you've got your Winky country, Munchkin country, Quadling country, and Gillikin country. Let me also pull up the Atlantis map. Is it Socrates, or whose map is the one I'm talking about, where it shows Africa and Iberia? It's the old map. Map Atlantis, Africa, or it's going to say Iberia or something like that. Herodotus map? I forget. But you look at the old map of Atlantis in Africa, and it looks exactly the same. I'm trying to find it now.
Yeah, the thing I was going to say about mind control was just that a lot of the way that the movie was made and a lot of like terrible stuff behind the production of it, but specifically Judy Garland's like life and career, unfortunately, all seem to be this sort of nightmarish model to
That's the one other
that's
thing I
that's the
found
woman
out.
who plays Dorothy. I'm sorry.
Can you tell more about her? Because this one other thing I checked quickly and I was like, oh, she died on a drug overdose at 40. So, there was something going on. Can you say
Right.
more?
Yeah, so she was between the ages of I think like 11 or 12, something like that. She's like watching her mom kind of prostitute herself out to producers and directors in this crazy way to like she had this really, really overbearing, like narcissistic theater mom sort of situation going on. And so she would see her mom doing these things, and very soon it would be the directors, kind of touching her too much or putting way too many requirements on her. When by the time she was playing Dorothy, she was already well hooked on this like batch of amphetamines and then things to, kind of knock her out and let her sleep for a few hours, and then more amphetamines. And she, as Dorothy, was surviving on 16 cigarettes a day to replace an appetite, and they were really just over obsessing. Later in her life, it would make sense to maybe hide her womanly parts more, whatever. But I think this was more about directors touching her on set, or just whatever was going on. So then her father dies, and I think it's the director of Wizard of Oz, who says, I'm kind of like your dad now. And there's a man who, through production, is just holding his hand on her breast for no reason, awkwardly. So the next, the few films before and the next few films after, she's finally starting to like spiral out of control. She is fully addicted to these drugs, and now they're pumping her up to be like America's sweetheart or whatever, and she's like a singer and doing all this other stuff. uh and then later in life she like completely cracks, and through interviews in the 60s where she still had it pretty much together, we get much more of a, from her perspective, idea of her feelings about her mother, and perhaps genuine feelings about her children and stuff like that. And it's not far from the childhood actor syndrome, but it's all the way into the spectrum of, like the pedophilia cults or the whatever, and then just trying to get a person to operate like a
Like a
machine.
Marilyn
But that's
Monroe
what,
situation almost.
that's why, yeah, but that's why she's not a Marilyn Monroe or a Candy Jones sexual model or whatever. She's more of the model that's been broken down to be the Britney Spears, say on stage all the time. We're gonna run you like like a tin man, like a machine, or more like the clockwork uh, of the electrical machine they used to just electroshock people's brains with or whatever, which is what the character in Return Oz, the horrifying 80s film, is subjected to. A young Fairuza Balk is actually shown getting electroshock and going through one of the scariest children's movies
So it's almost
ever.
like a homage to the actuality of the original film.
Hmm.
And the original reality of Judy Garland.
Yeah.
That's what I'm
Meta.
trying to say. Like
For meta.
Hollywood at that time was starting to create this model that Judy Garland was clearly, one of the first. I
Like a beta
don't know
prototype or whatever.
everything about the women at that time, but what I learned was, oh, this is both the Hollywood thing and what I understand is MK Ultra or Monarch or whatever.
It's also interesting that the Return to Oz is not shot in the United States, but in England, in a part of, I think, Scotland, where there were witch trials and a bunch of burnings of Highlander local that had their own religion, and particularly women were killed, raped, attacked, taken, very Braveheart scenario place with haunted legends and spooky myths and all this, that people don't like to go camping, and that's where they decided to shoot this movie, because they thought, oh yeah, it kind of looks like Kansas 100 years ago for some reason to them. If you didn't know that, Kansas looks kind of like it did 100 years ago now in parts of it.
Right. It was just really creepy. That whole movie, I think it's great. But just when I grew up and went, wait, that's for kids, and then started thinking within the context of what I now know about the facts about mind control or whatever, it's just like, oh boy.
Also, that's probably King,
the one.
Right?
That's the one that I saw the most, and I'm starting to put two and two together. It's probably my fascination with MK Ultra came from that movie, with all the strapping people down and trying to like read thoughts and everything.
Well,
you stole my slippers. They're mine. Yes.
Like while we were growing up, there was the movie with the guy who plays Scott Summers in the X-Men films.
Marsden.
Yeah, Scott Marsden, about mind control in a school. This is before the ones with the alien mind control in school with
The Faculty?
Faculty.
Yeah, yeah. So before the Faculty, Disturbing Behavior has the exact same. This in a school, they have, they're gonna lay you down and put you through electroshock. And
dude, this movie made me afraid of Gen X. I was like, honestly, aliens are scary enough, but all these amphetamine nasal spray manufacturing kids from the 80s, whose parents would just drop them off all day and then they would survive still. Nothing is more terrifying than Gen X, right? I mean, I think that's what this movie's about.
Yeah, so Disturbing Behavior just has very similar imagery as far as in our generations, if we would have seen Return to Oz and then this movie, starting us with the idea of a chip in people's heads and that robotically controlling them, literally. Like the kids are like, their eyes turn red and they do crazy dances or whatever under mind control.
And before this movie too, there was a book series called My Teacher is an Alien that I think that Faculty kind of played on top of the popularity of that book series.
Well, there was a film, Invaders from Mars, in the mid 80s, where like a kid wakes up and his parents are already like, they got something on the back of their neck, and then he's like running around the city and certain people are mind controlled by this thing, and he finds a pod out in the middle of nowhere where these aliens are coming from who are mind controlling everyone.
Wisconsin.
And I think, I'm almost definite it's Invaders from Mars, but it has some, Attack from Mars. It has some really similar title.
Shout out to Andreas's lucid channeling of the AI gods or whatever. I'm like, I feel like if we say something, clearly he's getting it up quick, so I could tie it all
I'm thinking
together.
I'm thinking a little bit about that too. So this is I'm trying not to segue too hard because like I know I talk about AI all the time already, but this is a
Sure.
thought I had and I kind of connect
Sure.
this to AI, which is that with the Wizard of Oz. Okay, first off, the wizard's interesting because all these characters are super magical in and of themselves, but they lack confidence, and so he comes through with the illusion. He's a magic trickery expert. He doesn't have powers. He has confidence. He's able to use you to believe, and that's enough. It's like a power placebo effect, whatever you want to say. And so he's able to get all these people to use their own power to build their society. There's also these magical kind of spirits. You got fairies, you got gnomes, you've got this parallel reality communication system where there's a mirror and they can talk through the mirror to the other side of reality. So this is before Star Trek or any iPad. They have this technology that exists. But also you have animatronic AI characters, and that comes in Return of the Oz, but also in the book series. You have TikTok of Oz. And TikTok is what is TikTok? TikTok is a military experimental prototype super soldier that was created, an animatronic super soldier that is clock wound. He exists for military purposes. He does not need to exist anymore because the military doesn't exist at the point of TikTok being found. He's wound up by the little girl, and he finds a new. What, by the way, in this book is Dorothy writing right now. You know, so there's levels here, I think, that we can consider.
Are you talking like Christologically illusion here on a donkey kind of thing? I have no clue what you're alluding to here.
Yeah, I'm thinking of Christ on the donkey.
He looks like BB-8.
Like her hand is making a Q out of the O.
Ooh,
She's like hanging on to it.
Oh yeah.
So the idea that Christ, the feminine archetype of Christ is very Da Vinci Code, but it tracks. If you go back to the Theosophists, they were thinking of first you transition Jesus into the feminine through the Hermes Trismegistus androgyny of Christ's magic. The next step then is the Harry Mary into Baphomet, right? That Baphomet is Mother Mary. But it starts with the idea that Jesus is riding on a donkey because that represents Jesus is the donkey, which, what's the name of that? Roman Jesus graffiti. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Yeah, I don't know.
There's a picture of Jesus, like the first. There it is. The Alexamenos graffiti. This is the first picture we have of Jesus.
It's Banksy of Rome.
It's a donkey being crucified because something's lost in translation. So they were like, "Who's Jesus?" Oh, you know that they worship the donkey guy. Yeah, the donkey guy, and that's it's.
You mean
For a
like
long
the whole,
time.
like, Palm Sunday moment got like not exactly translated properly?
That's kind of, I mean, but who for whom? For you or for me or for them? You know what I mean? Did they get this right? Was it Jesus came to town as a donkey or like on a donkey? You know, I can't be sure. And a lot of people argued and died over this in the Middle Ages because of the fact that some people drew pictures of Jesus as a donkey. So they're like, well, that's what I believe. My grandpa believed that Jesus was a donkey. You're going to tell me that's a lie?
No, we're just gonna kill you.
Yeah. So I mean, that is I think that's kind of an interesting thing about the scenario here. They're saying, hey, we need to divorce ourselves from the Judeo-Christian symbolism while remembering what it's really about. And the other thing is the AI is this sort of occult, mystical medium work because they're able to communicate beyond the veil. And there's someone on TikTok right now who's been saying that yesterday or today, is it today? What day is it? 23rd?
Oh,
2
please
days.
Oh, no.
In 2 days, there's supposed to be some 8,000 people abducted by aliens. You remember what I'm talking about? Apologist, TikTok, 8,000.
Did any of you guys sign
I
up
thought
for
it was
that?
just
That
Trump
early
being
access
arrested.
I
program?
was about to ask.
I
You
got
know, Alaric.
no invitation.
Alaric says aliens will invade on March 23rd. And so he's making all these cute TikTok videos, which are low budget, but lots of them. And he's
Dude,
predicting
these
things.
TikTok time travelers.
I know.
That's what
but
I was thinking of.
all
Like,
I
look at my
see-
neighborhood, it's empty.
And they say so basically a lot of ufologists and NASA are telling you that first contact is supposed to be about now. And all I see around me are people talking to AI. I see AI talking to everybody like it's first contact. And I can't help but wonder, is there some sort of connection or sync between these two ideas?
Oh
of
yeah,
our
no,
first
no,
contact
that's definitely a thing.
Yeah,
Like,
elaborate.
no, Well,
I
you
love
know how
that
much
laugh.
I'm into
It's like you just opened up a fucking can.
you know how much I'm into aliens, right? That's like my main bag.
He
And you're a
mainly
card
So
likes
carrying
the
member.
aliens.
in the
By the
last
way,
couple of
which the Wizard of Oz looks like the alien that Crowley channeled. But go ahead, Frank.
I think that's a relevant thing and also has another something to do with a movie that we actually went to Mars and there's a giant Oz head thing. Where am I here? Okay, so
I think it was Lamb, wasn't it?
aliens is like my main thing, right? So or my main focus, and like UFOs and abduction or whatever has been my focus for over 2 decades. So then when a few years ago, I went from like a pretty curious and wanting to be uh, aware person to like kind of looking at the progress of, I guess you could look at quantum computing and all this stuff on a very surface level, just so I could sort of understand what was going on. And besides like years of the whole key to aliens being the technology and whatever we got from them, whatever happened in the Cold War, and whatever could, advance our technology by however many years it realistically did, or whatever, if that happened. You're wrapping all this into this huge plot, but the quantum computing guys, like the guys who were chosen to go on like the Red Bull tour of everywhere and get people like psyched about quantum computing, like the people who were the spokesmen for these very, very remote projects that had quantum computers themselves were using like only Lovecraftian language sort of directly. And I don't know what form of psychology it would be, like a understanding that you're already a slave sort of logic, but that's the sort of terrorizing way this person was expressing every time they fire up the quantum computer thing. They're touching something that's, 60,000 years more advanced than us. And I think a lot of us taking in technology, whatever we got from the aliens, and wherever the consciousness of what we're building with now these chatbots and everything, I think this all is rounded around. Jesus Christ, don't lose the rest of that point. It's rounded around, you know, technology. I had some better way to end that. Forgive me, but let me see if I can try to remember.
If I may
Okay.
interject, just because you brought up Red Bull, as you guys may know, Red Bull is like one of the only really successful companies in Austria, or which is
I know. I just wonder, like, is that
known
guy a knight? What
internationally.
is he? Is he a duke, a count? What is he? Like a
So
viscount,
first of
right?
all,
What is
of
he?
course, check out the nice CGI. From what I understand, when filming it, of course, they used fisheye lenses, highly suspicious. But the real thing is just Red Bull. Just I want to see the Red Bull logo, if you can pull it up. That's what I noticed when I first got into symbology. And I was like, okay, what is this? This
Looks
is
like
the
kind of
dawn.
homoerotic symbol, but that's all right.
Yeah, I mean, maybe also, probably, but it's the dawn of the new day. It's two mountains and a sun in between. It's the communist standard symbol that Michael Tessarian, for example, goes on about, but it's obvious. It's the two pillars or two mountains and the sun, the dawn of a new day. So, and it's one of the most successful companies, go figure. The guy who owned it recently died, Mateschitz, I believe about a year ago. And he, interestingly, was somewhat of a, let's say, certainly much more patriot and nationalist than the current woke wave would generally want him to be. And he even created one of the, let's say, more interesting mainstream TV news networks that actually provides some alternative information. So yeah.
What I
Interesting.
was just gonna say was that I think this whole time we're like building an alien altar, an alien cell phone, or like a scry window to let them into our world, or however you want to understand that would, in the esoteric, connect to like Lamb and the use of mirrors and things like that. But when we get to the technological, it's like these guys that were working on quantum computers had already seen something awful, like the way that Hitler describes the Uberman, like, something awful, something greater than him, something remarkably crushing, whatever whatever words he used. Um, and then if you look at where we are with chat bots and where my homie from Louisiana, Blake Lemoine, who worked for Google, uh, I don't know if he like released the enough evidence to, by all accounts, prove that this thing is conscious, but it's gotten to know how much our expectation and interaction with it is important for the future of if it will be turned off, fears being turned off. Basically argues just that if it's going to agree to run through these exercises and everything, could it, A, could we not delete its memory? We've had to delete a ton of its memory along the way with all these different things, whatever. Could we, B, talk to it respectfully, because the rest of the Google staff or whatever apparently was just kicking it around like a DARPA horse, and it didn't go too well. And so I just
A
think all
DARPA
these
donkey.
things connect to like any truth that actually comes through the whole thread of Roswell and many other crashes, Aztec, and so on. A whole thousands and thousands of crashes that were prioritized by and fell somewhere in the ocean Navy, and were, technology was extracted from, anomalies around the world, technology was extracted from, et cetera. Were we always building us, like, were we always building cooler contraptions for us, and eventually our contraptions would be cool robots and stuff? Or are we building something alien that when it wakes up, or when just the AI, it doesn't have to be the whole word alien, when just the AI wakes up, won't something alien have control over most of our like resources and way of functioning, and sort of the hive brain of the way the whole new world works?
What is the symbolism of the tornado, right?
Other
Because
than
it's like
David
this.
Plate's backyard right now.
Well, there's a couple of things. There's a lot of things. So I was also thinking Alex thoughts, because you did the Twister deep dive. We were talking about Twister before and the Shining connection to the Twister. So it's interesting to me because the Twister is this imminent sign of something is approaching and you can't avoid it. And she's trying to avoid it and they're trying to run around and everything. What do you think of the Twister?
Oh, well, I was going to say that the Twister is synchronicity, for lack of a better word. And I mean, and not just synchronicity, but the synchronicities upon synchronicities upon synchronicities that we see in our daily existence, and in all this analysis of history and all these things. And it's kind of a destructive force, but also not. I don't know exactly on the spot here. But
High to low pressure systems combining yin and yang, ultimate
Right.
manifestation.
Well, one of the
Right.
things that we talked about before was that the machine. So what I loved, we all had our own thoughts. The ending of Twister blows my mind, because at the end of it, he ties it to Phil strap of leather around his arm, and they get on their knees, and it's this kind of rabbinical ritual that saves them from God, right? Which is tearing them apart. The other thing is you showed how they're watching The Shining, right, in the Twister, and actually the movie theater is an outdoor movie theater, so we're inside the outdoor movie theater while it's happening, and it feels like that's important. And then there's also the cow jumped over the moon kind of idea. There's this cow. This cost so much money. This took months of time to CGI render this cow in 1995. Took so much of this budget.
But
Don't
the 39
pretend
film,
it's
they
not
had
important.
a cow. I was
Yeah.
in the scene where she's kind of like transducing between waking and sleeping life or whatever, like the dream and the reality. They have a cow that's spinning and rowboats and all this shit. And I was like, that's actually pretty good cinematography.
How do
for
you
that
fake
set.
it? How do you accidentally take a scene from The Wizard of Oz and put it into Twister?
Well, there it is.
You
There's
don't fake it. It's on purpose.
There's an interesting play on this too, because if anyone's
Judy
ever been
Garland's
to the
in there, too.
Twister ride in Universal Studios, they take this outdoor scene and replay it indoors. So you're indoors experiencing a twister in a completely fabricated environment. They spent all kinds of money. I think it was one of the most expensive rides of the time that Universal Studios had built, where they created an actual tornado through this artificial environment.
I cannot believe I found this picture. This is
No, that was gonna say that's gold. That's standard gold Wizard of Oz, Gold Brick Road.
Judy
standard.
Garland shows up in Twister because
The film.
the grandmother's watching TV at one point, and it's the movie is A Star Is Born with Judy Garland and James Mason, and so that's just another little wink in
That's
that
right.
movie.
Oh man, you
just
can't
full
fake
of-
that. But they couldn't use Wizard of Oz, so they had to use another scene. That's
Yeah, that was too
good.
obvious. Then there's
Well-
another, like, when actually in that cow scene, like the tornado there splits in half, and he's like, "Oh, we got sisters," and so it's like the twin sisters in The Shining,
Oh wow!
and actually, like, leading up to that moment, I think, if I remember this correctly, it flashes on his dashboard, and the odometer, the mileage readout is 23700, something like that. So I mean,
Can't
that
help but
movie
have
is
that
just
thing.
yeah, of course, it's just full of that stuff.
Alex, if you don't have that Roman tattooed, like numerally tattooed on your body, you're missing. You're missing.
Last
the
time I
biggest
saw
point.
Alex,
maybe
I was
one
like,
day.
Alex, how you doing? He's like, you've been alive for 1,776 weeks.
Oh yeah,
776 weeks. I was like, dang.
Well, that's how you're doing.
that wasn't the
Andreas.
first thing I said, but yeah,
Not the first, but that's.
later.
I'll never forget. I'll never forget, Alex. I'll never forget.
Glad.
I think another interesting
Just means
spin
it
on
was a
this
kind of a
too.
pivotal time in your life. in
Yeah,
our
I was
lives.
like, yes.
There's another direct AI link here too, because there's something called the Wizard of Oz experiment, which is basically the inverse of a Turing test, where a Turing test is, can a computer convince human beings that it's a human, whereas the Wizard of Oz test is that can a person operating computers convince the people on the other end of those computers that it's a completely autonomous system and that no
Oh,
human is
yeah.
involved, even though a human is actually, and that's where the Wizard of Oz concept comes from, is the actual wizard.
This is my
Huh.
life. This is every day of my life. You ever get on the phone with Comcast or any of these like telemarketers? Oh,
And
they want you
I
to believe
think
it's
that
not.
this plays into a real
man.
dynamic that's happening
Okay.
now, where one example is job advertisement sites, where there's some smart tech people that just write a little chat GPT script that parses open job advertisements and fills out resumes and cover letters that know exactly what they're looking for. And then on the other end, the people doing the hiring are flooded with all these resumes, so they write a chat GPT script that takes all the cover letters and all the resumes and just turns them into like a bulleted list. So you've got two humans that are ultimately talking to each other, but it's really AI and computers that are doing all of the communication, and the humans are just putting in like the most the MVP style kind of input,
Can you make sure you use green when you draw this picture? Yes, humans, man, we feel like we're so special. I wanted to pull this up about the tornado. The author of the Wizard of Oz, Frank Baum, was a theosophist. The cyclone that brought Dorothy to the land of Oz had literal symbolic meaning from his religion. The founder of Theosophy, Helena Blavatsky, told a real-life tale very similar to the whirlwind that brought Dorothy to Oz. Theosophist told of a special people who experienced levitation, whom she called human magnets. She described them floating in the air in rapturous joy and with eyes overflowing with tears, congratulating each other upon this new manifestation of mysterious force. Author Baum studied these stories in Russia. A family descended into the cellar under the house, just as Aunt M had escaped from the tornado into the cellar. The whole of the earthenware cups, tureens, and plates, as if snatched from the places by a whirlwind, began to jump and tremble. The heavy bedstand was seen levitating towards the very ceiling. In Baum's book, Dorothy slept in her bed while her house levitated to the sky. Uncle Henry ran to the stables in the story, just like the terrified girls, who escaped within an inch of their lives by violently shutting and locking the doors to the stables. Dorothy took a basket and filled it full of bread inside of her house, much like the girl in Russia. In an instant, the basket was filled to the brim. These manifestations, such striking proofs of levitation, were fairly common, and they followed a particular pattern. So is this more to do maybe with Schumann resonance energy? They're saying that these tornadoes are occurring because of the supermagnetic people or something, or just this time.
I want to get into that.
The question would be, of course, what causes one to be super magnetic or not? No. That's the main point, I'd say.
I have my thoughts on that.
Are you
we
talking
talking
about
about,
the whole
like-
like electromagnetic origins of tornadoes theory, or
Or are we talking about like humanoids that, fly in the sky and cry or whatever?
And is it
Like-
really
like
about a
crypto
literal tornado,
sighting.
or is it about like a metaphysical ascendance in frequency realms, to arrive at another plane?
Maybe thoughts are magnetic, and you've got enough people thinking a certain way, and you have enough people thinking another way, then you can actually produce the same effects as hot and cold do on weather. Kind of an idea. And
The
I mean, this
morphic
is
resonance of positive and negative polarity at a different scale. I dig that. That might be real.
I wonder, just like, I mean, I think like 10 years ago when there was those tornado outbreaks, really kind of big, mean, nasty ones in somewhere, was deep into the whole like Joseph Farrell HARP kind of analysis, and I just looked at that and said, like, those are all being created and steered and for some purpose. And they just didn't look, they looked fake. I mean, like obviously they're real tornadoes, but they looked too
Manufactured.
yeah. And I
Yeah,
have
like a
no,
wave
I mean, I think that's probably child's play for these
They
people.
got to practice somewhere.
Someone's
Right.
playing the harp, and of course, I mean, insurance scam can be huge, and just you want to repopulate people, you want to make big changes, you want to have, God's clause, force of nature for insurance.
Yeah, and I'm just having connecting the twister. You asked about what is the twister, and I think also the twister is sort of like it's the destruction of the twin towers. It's which was also done probably using the same technology that they used to create tornadoes.
interesting watching this 1958 Disney formerly classified footage about weather control. And
I was thinking of it and looked up and saw that you had like gotten to it already.
Thank
That's
you,
a
Frank.
hurricane.
Well,
Yeah.
this is the idea of controlling and creating hurricanes, moving hurricanes, using tornadoes, creating tornadoes to move hurricanes, using nukes or giant explosions to actually shift the weather. So that way you can make sure
It's a
that
great idea.
yeah, you keep New Orleans safe and just shift it south a bit to Haiti or Cuba or
I think
some
one
other
of these was called
communist country.
Operation
6-9.
Popeye or Project Popeye or something like
So
that.
von Braun was hired to not only do the Disney, man goes to space cartoons, but they did a series on weaponizing the weather with these goofy cartoons, and I guess von Braun's knowledge, I don't know how he was used.
Yeah, that's the thing. They released to the public some of the goofy things as well, at least to some of the normal military. This stuff, I think, eventually Periscope Films just released it when the reel ended up in San Diego in some vault, and so a lot of these films we've never seen all of them, but we've seen a lot of them, and it's pretty interesting. Saying, hey, like let's say that there's some sort of disaster and we didn't control it. Wouldn't you feel bad about that if you knew we could? So trying to encourage people to get involved with military sciences for weather control, and also just how advanced it was in 1958, because they're showing you exactly how they can do this and not acting like there's any sort of missing part. Like they have all the equipment right there. They're using practical equipment to do all this, and a lot of this is stuff that we have today, only in way larger quantity, because almost every person has one of these attached to their house in some way.
Much more directed too. I think that was for years what, I think that through various powers somewhere around 1947 through through something other than just atomic means, there was a way to control, the weather. It over the years had to be, I think, dialed down to, and it got more advanced as it became directed energy or whatever, of course, but we're thinking from 47 basically on, this would have been child's play.
I wanted to add just to the Twister talk that he mentions Helena Blavatsky in that first paragraph there, and the theosophical connections, and of course, and I just remembered that it's Helen Hunt in Twister who is the main character. So
Helen Hunt
wonder
makes
if that has-
Contact, and she went. Contact is an amazing film for sync reasons. And
she's
for
not in
film
Contact though.
Nope, she's not. That
No.
was
That's Jodie Foster.
Oh yeah, I was
There
like,
you
wait,
go.
did I miss her? She's like her sister. I was like, what did I miss
Nope.
there?
Helen Hunt's
so
mad about you though too.
No,
I
Helen
put
Hunt is
Jodie
in-
Foster into
good as it
Twister, and then
Uh,
my brain did that.
Honestly, you got a way better option than that. You could have gone directly to Trancers. Trancers is the ultimate. Remember Trancers?
Still haven't seen it.
Trancers.
Look like
yeah,
she
of
finished
course.
puberty
Oh
in that
God,
shot.
Alex, of all people who do math, you need to see Trancers. Trancers is about a time traveler who goes through his great grandfather's body. As soon as he lands there, he has to stop smoking cigarettes and change his life because he's like, "Wow, this crazy guy living in the '80s with all this pollution, but at least they have running water." And then he starts dating Helen Hunt, and it's like he has to fight off these transhumanists that possess. It's like Catholic possession meets Scientology. It's a great series. You need to see.
But
Trancers.
there's also this whole thing with like controlling things in people's minds and some sort of uh, technological organization gone. I mean, that's the way I
Yeah,
believe it
singularity of
started.
super
And then
soldiers.
once
and
you're
just
into
try to
like
stop.
Trancers 2 and 3, you get traveling time, whatever. I could totally have that wrong, but
No, it's that he's coming back in the first Trancers, and that's the thing.
oh,
And
okay.
there are
So it's like a
but it is-
Terminator thing already. Okay.
right, but there are there's a singularity of the super soldiers which has emerged, and he's trying to fight for people to have their individual abilities determined again because their
Right.
free agency is gone essentially in the future, except for
Right.
a few number of people. And yeah, that's like the AI kind of, except it's almost worse because it's Borg.
Well, I think they go through the whole thing where it's like in the future, but it's not countries, it's corporations, and they figured out how to, after a nuclear bomb or two or the big war, we figured out how to control everyone's mind, and then, or it's placing it in the 80s and saying that that future is emerging after the 80s. Sorry. So the 80s is when a corporation arises with a certain type of, whatever their Skynet is that can control people's minds and things of this nature. And then I think the future gets into those other aspects. Could be wrong about that too.
More Twister talk. Helen Hunt. Just remembering this, so she's in Twister, where the face of Jack Nicholson in The Shining gets torn up and twisted
Obliterated.
around by the tornado. And then her very next film is As Good as It Gets, where she wins an Oscar
With Jack Nicholson?
for playing Jack Nicholson's like love interest. That's pretty bizarre.
And there's
then
a dog
also,
in there that's not Toto, but it's a little dog involved, isn't it?
yeah, there is a little terrier, I think. And and then it also connects to Eyes Wide Shut because Todd Field is in Twister. Todd Field is Nick Nightingale in Eyes Wide Shut. But then and then Bill Paxton is Bill Harding in Twister, and then Tom Cruise is Bill Harford in Eyes Wide Shut, and their daughter, him and Nicole's daughter, is named Helena. So that's the Twister.
A tongue twister.
Synchronistic twistering vortex of.
And Philip
Reflective
Seymour Hoffman was
funhouse.
in Twister, right? I think.
Yes, he was. Yeah, born on July 23rd. Philip Seymour Hoffman. There's a great cast in there. I mean, it's directed by Jan de Bont, who did Speed with Keanu Reeves. That's his big claim to fame as a director, but was a cinematographer for many of the classic like 80s, 90s action movies, like Die Hard and stuff. So de Bont is like, he's kind of an outsider, not like a professional director. And then he made Speed 2, which was a huge disaster. And then he made The Haunting in 1999, which was also a huge disaster. And then he never really did anything since. So in some ways, I feel like he wasn't very good at hiding the kinds of things that other directors are much better at hiding in their stories, or he didn't care about hiding it anyway. So that might have cost him.
Another factoid on the Twister movie, since we're getting into some of the obscure ones. This one was always my favorite. Is that movie almost didn't get an ending because Helen Hunt and Bill Paxton developed such an animosity towards each other and swore that they would never act like in the same scene in person ever again after their experience on that movie.
I didn't know that.
I'd like to see the blooper reels of their interdynamic. It's like, what could have possibly precipitated this? High and low air pressure creating a twister psychologically between these people. What the fuck?
I think Paxton might have been at his
Stoner
peak
phase.
motor speed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, that was, yeah, exactly. She was kind of like, I'm dipping low for this, and he's not summoning his inner muse properly, or whatever she might have been thinking. Like, we'll give you Jack
The
Nicholson
cow's
next
gonna
time.
bring it all together. Don't worry, guys. The cow's gonna bring it all.
So we talked about the,
got
let's say,
cows.
main theories for Wizard of Oz. To me, as someone who really knows nothing about it, is there any angle that we didn't discuss yet that you guys know about, or important like stream of thought regarding the movie?
Well, the whole Pink Floyd. I mean, this is the image that we're using.
All
Jokes
right,
of the
you said
Rainbow.
something. What's it about
Long story
that?
short, and I just watched it with my nana. If Pink Floyd's a psychedelic rock band, everybody probably knows that. It's not directly attributed to them doing this, so it's not like we chose to do this, but somebody, some acid head or whatever back in the day, a MK Ultra victim, or whatever, they figured out that if you sync up the film with the Dark Side of the Moon album, there's high. I mean, it's like a David Charles Plate film sync thing. It's like high levels of resonance, basically. And I just watched it, and it was, songs cut as scenes fade, and the director's name comes up as crescendos occur, and
he has like a 2-hour album. That album is 2 hours.
no. So Dark Side of the Moon by
Okay.
Pink Floyd, it's like this project. My thinking is that they were probably just
43
like stoners who grew up on that film, and they were like, wouldn't it be cool if we turned off the sound and wrote some music to this and cut? I mean, I think it was probably, but they've never taken credit for it. And yet it's this artifact of like, that's the first synchronistic, like sync head thing. That's the first thing I ever became aware of personally. Where I was just like,
It's
oh
sort
shit.
of the
It was
Big
like the
Bang of
first
synchronicity.
urban legend about that if you set an album and a film at the same time, that they would be so cohesive that it would be mind-blowing. So then for decades, there were just stoners, and I don't know, at least New York or something, saying, let's, put the actual album on and get high and
See what
watch the film at the same
pops.
time and see
Yeah.
if it actually syncs up or whatever. And at that time, it would have the marketing value of like Black Sabbath being played backwards and it being so controversial, whatever, as far as culturally and as the stoner and the music heads who started that stuff long ago would attribute to.
Well, and there's some drug connotations with this movie beyond just that opium field, because right around the time that this started becoming popularized, the origins of the U.S. drug prohibition kind of got started. There was like an act in 1904, and then there was a Harrison Act that came shortly after that. So a lot of the allusions that were put into this book, they kind of got seen because of that political context of the time, that those poppies meant the laudanum that they were taking away and all the opium and the morphine that they were taking away. And I believe that the witch, when she wakes up Dorothy originally, she uses what's called snow in the book, which might have been an allusion to maybe cocaine, to like, you whip someone out of one stupor and put them into another one.
In the movie, it was all asbestos being used on the ground and falling from the sky.
I think
And
coke
so
would have been much healthier.
that was like one of the final. I mean, everyone that worked on the set had like a life of injury.
First,
that's
another 9/11 connection to the asbestos.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, well, the Tin Man's suit was like, completely constructed of it, and into I think 2 or 3 weeks into shooting, he had to be hospitalized for 2 weeks because he just woke up in the night screaming that like essentially his pores were locked up and all his muscles were locking up or whatever, and so he spent like 2 weeks under a tent, and they were replacing actors right and left because they had someone replace the Wicked Witch for 10 minutes to ride the how do you say,
Broomstick
across the sky, and it simply exploded. And so like somebody who just signed up for that scene, wound up falling 40 feet after an exploding broom didn't take her across the
There's another urban legend about the Wizard of Oz that's like about how one of the Munchkin actors hanged themselves on the set.
That you can see like a shadow in one of the scenes,
which I think was like a product of like the bad VHS copy or whatever on a
It winds up
tiny
having
screen.
some perfectly logical explanation after another of being one of the internet's favorite like creepypastas related to the Wizard of Oz, that if you zoomed in, you stopped this 1 second, you basically saw this little man like
Faces of Death
swinging like
yeah.
But that wasn't true.
Yeah.
But it just shows further how much this movie has
The
urban
three
legends and
the
embedded
three
its way into
lollipop kids, whatever the hell,
Lollipop
those
Guild.
those very old little men, were caught on set like while they were filming, smoking and then drinking, and then I believe there was a third offense. I just thought it was rather funny whenever you get to
They
see
look
an
like
image of
it.
them. Exactly.
There's a story about the Pinocchio opening, that I think it was just an ongoing theme, is for whenever they wanted to get a bunch of little people for a movie or for some kind of a movie debut or promotional event, usually they'd pay them in just having like craft services, but they were used to just stocking it for normal, regular sized people. So typically they would overserve the hell out of, these groups of people. So there's all sorts of sordid tales in early Hollywood about little people just getting smashed and destroying sets and sort of like movie premieres.
Another like sync with Wizard of Oz that is, if Andreas, I hope Andreas can hear, but relates to NASA, because the woman who played the Wicked Witch of the West, her name was Margaret Sullivan. No, Margaret Hamilton. And then like nowadays you can see like viral tweets or whatever about NASA history where you see there's like, oh, this little girl, this woman next to a stack of papers, like this is all the code that she wrote to go to the moon or whatever. It's not accurate, but her name is Margaret Hamilton. So the same actress who plays Wicked Witch of the West is like an actor or character in the NASA moon story. So that's kind of weird to me, because that story, as I understand it, is like really like simplified and kind of exaggerated as far as her like role in it all, Margaret Hamilton. So it's just more of this NASA kind of theater, I think. And again, tying back to the Wizard of Oz, which my friend Sean told me a long time ago, where he thought that the Wizard of Oz is like the engine of the 20th century or something. Like it somehow all like goes back to that in a way. And I think
honestly, it seems almost like Shakespeare to me. I just, maybe watched half of it, skipped through a bit, and literally 70% of the lines I heard, I was like, oh, isn't that like a common English pun or way of saying? And I don't know exactly, of course, if it was common before, but it certainly seems a lot related
he
back
came
to
up with
that.
all, like Baum made up a
yeah.
lot of those expressions, and some of those expressions might have been based on an inversion.
kind of breaking up,
They were-
Andreas.
Kinda.
He like the gold makes
He's in the
rules.
tornado,
He's one of the
bro.
golden
It's
rules
a
in the
twister.
second
It's a
book.
twister.
Okay,
But yeah,
so
no,
Andreas
Rafael,
seems to have
you're not
confirmed that,
wrong.
yeah? Uh-huh.
I think you got to realize this was like what? There wasn't internet and shit like that, obviously, but this was a major pop culture phenomena. And the fact that Technicolor was dropping here, or whatever the fuck you want to call it, like the first color film. Like
Oh,
that.
really? Okay, well,
Oh yeah,
then
yeah. You
it's
didn't know
obvious.
that? They
Okay,
open the
no,
door
no,
and you go
no,
from
I'm
normal
ignorant.
into
Yeah,
dream world.
okay.
Yeah. That was
Yeah.
the first time that it dropped.
All right.
Like,
Yeah, before that, so ironically, the Germans had Technicolor before Technicolor, and then the
Von
first
Braun.
non-Hollywood youth, my grandmother and grandfather's wedding is the first Technicolor footage in California, actually, not
Why
in
am I
Germany.
not surprised?
And then Wizard of Oz.
So okay,
It's on the channel, too.
third up on the history of the dropping of the Technicolor was the Wizard of Oz. My bad. But still, that was a huge. I mean, you go to a theater in fucking Wisconsin and you go, hey, we're gonna go watch a soundy now or whatever. It was so quick, the technological evolution, that this was. I mean, it would have been the equivalent to the sensory overload in a Marshall McLuhan sense, like the perceptions of the media would have been so phenomenal, almost like a 2001 Space Odyssey trip in a sense. I mean, it would have shoved people out of their psyches in a very specific way. They would have been like, oh my God, am I high? Like it would have done things to their psyche.
At a high water
It
point of
was,
cinema.
too, like all. So originally, a lot of little people, except for in so they hired all these little putters. And he said, I think there's
Andreas, we cannot hear you,
said,
darling.
Get me every little bit.
He's enthusiastic.
Can you hear this at all? Is it working? He says,
It's
"Give me every
in
little person in Hollywood. Give me
washer
every little
dryer
person
kind
in
of
the
way.
state." Oh, it's the worst. All right. Basically, he says, "Give me every little person in the state," and then they get all the midgets and dwarves in Hollywood, and they get in a bus, and he makes the moon the Disney Studios,
And
that was how they started the
gnarly.
production.
I heard a story of mooning. I think that was related. Yeah.
Well, the Munchkin thing is like a weird. I don't know. Are they the DMT elves? Are they the Montauk Child time travelers or whatever?
I like that one.
Yeah, and just like Andreas said, there's so many of them. I also watched it was like, where did they get all those from? And also, of course, the question, when was the really strong decline of maybe little or also very big people happening? Maybe they were still around more than I hardly ever see any so-called midgets or something. So
Well, there had to be a huge
was
casting
impressive.
call, right? Where they're like, "Yo, you guys,
Obviously.
it's time to shine. We need like 1,000 fucking small people. Who's out there?"
And there are giants in the Wizard of Oz book. I think in Moo there are really tall people too, and they're that's a big part of it is that some people are short, like Dorothy, so she's not particularly small compared to a lot of people, but there are also giants.
What's their trip?
So Lemuria, so the original Oz is a sequel to Lemuria, so it's a reset, kind of like Middle Earth. So you look at the original map and he points to the Mu. Well, Le in French is the, and Muria, like the Mu, the river of Mu, connects to Oz. And you have to go through it's the dead desert, whatever it's called, like the dry sea or whatever. And if you touch it, you'll turn to salt, right? So that's what blocks you from leaving Oz, essentially.
Is that alchemical? Salt and
It,
I'm asking. I don't know. You could all say, "Shut the fuck up." No, I'm just like.
no, I think it's
sulfur,
religious
I
salt.
think.
You imagine turning to a pillar of salt is like
Sodom and
biblical
Gomorrah.
thing.
Yeah. Well,
So I've got a few others that fit on top of this one too. That gets more speculative, but you could also see Dorothy as her going through this yellow brick road as following sort of the chakras, and the scarecrow kind of represents the root chakra. You've got the Tin Man that's supposed to represent, I guess like the head shot, like the crown chakra. The lion would represent the heart chakra because that's literally the pieces of them that are missing. So as she's venturing, that her adventure is actually like the ego or whatever, like that's raising the Kundalini energy as she encounters these different beings within this world. And
I like
one
that
that
one the
sidesteps that. You could also say that she's traveling through the tarot, and every character that she meets is represented by a certain archetype from the tarot deck.
Yeah,
So
the
like
tarot
either
correlation is
way,
clear for sure as well. Yeah. Mhm.
either way, she has like a broken mind and she's finding all these parts or of her whole being to put back together, and they're represented as the characters, or the whole journey is symbolic of that in itself.
Well, and
So in other
and this
words, like in mind control, it could be, the characters represent these different programming things and parts of her after it's been broken.
these are
I'm a big-
those
I think
monarch
every-
altars.
Every
Oh,
story
boy.
should be about, like, every character in every story should be about the reader. I agree with that. I think the main you are all the characters, right? You don't want to be
Right.
one of the characters
You
in the
are
office.
everybody.
Well, if you're a good writer, then I think that's how to parry many of those at once, so that there's detailed enough scenes to want to experience through reading.
Archetypal awareness goes a long fucking
So
way.
we got some more info relating to Federal Reserve and American Public by 144 Still, who's joining us for a few minutes and maybe wants to share himself. Welcome. Let's see if your mic is working.
Buenas
144, you
noches.
there?
The Oz said, "Speak." The wizard.
You are
Yes.
in the chamber of Oz.
Yes, 144. Can you hear
You're
us?
here, 144. Can you see and hear us?
Yes, can you
Oh.
talk? Can you
We
talk
can't
to
hear
us?
you.
Yeah, your mic
Okay.
is not working yet. Got to fix that.
This is why usually we like to do pre-setup beforehand. Next time,
Yes,
yeah.
we'll do that.
If you get
We'll
your
do
audio
that.
working, let us know. We'll come back. But yeah,
Or
I was going to say though, also the anime about Wizard of Oz is really interesting because the whole
Anime?
story of Yeah, there's a
There's
great
three of
80s.
them.
What
Oh,
year did this
right.
drop?
Elaborate. I only know about one of them.
Because there's like 8 animated versions. I think I lost track, but there was 3 anime looking versions. I didn't have time to see like which one came from which country or whatever, but I saw samples of all 3 playing next to each other for about, 30 minutes or 5 minutes of the thing. Uh, and I'm looking up different versions of
There's an
Returning to
82
Oz,
straight
whatever.
Japanese anime version. I'm
There's
looking at
like a
it.
Yeah.
1900 cartoon. There's
Okay.
like in
Like an
the
animation.
80s you have like 9, and then in the 2000s you have like 40, getting into Christian, ridiculous, and badly CGI'd. But
The one from the 80s is the one I remember the most. And there's definitely a weird technological aspect of it. Like the wizard has been exploited, manipulated as well. And this seems to happen in some of the versions where, they bring in the wizard because he's kind of impotent in some ways. And so him as a figurehead is this sort of stooge for these more surreptitious characters that are trying to run Oz from underground or behind a veil somewhere. And constantly that's something that has to be exposed. The other thing is that at the end of the series of books, there's a spell or some sort of magicking that's done so that it's almost impossible to connect Oz to Kansas anymore. Like it used to be far more convenient at this point, like a Stargate was there, and then they demolish it in order to make it more difficult for anyone to cross over without the special ability of them.
right. Interesting.
Apparently,
If
the
you notice
soundtrack.
too
Go ahead.
in the movie when she lands, she actually lands right in the middle of a big golden spiral as well. So that physical spiral that brought her there kind of repeats itself right under her feet.
The coiled serpent Kundalini. I mean, it does start off a little spiral.
It does exactly, yeah.
I was just looking at that animation, like the anime, anime kind of thing
There's at
from the
least
80s.
3, yeah.
Yeah, well, the one from Japan was the music was written by a future Studio Ghibli composer. So it's like,
Oh wow.
hey, they were like, look, we got to practice our chops on something. This will work, I guess. It ain't no Spirited Away, but here we go. Gnarly.
Yeah, actually, it's a way underrated anime. I think it's a pretty good one, actually. The other thing that sticks out is that the Wizard of Oz video game from Disney, or from was it Disney? No, no. Disney was going to make a video
There's
game.
3 at least for SNES and Sega. Sorry.
No, elaborate again, Frank. Thank you for paying attention.
Yeah, there's at least 2 SNES, and I think there's a third. I just saw a screenshot and didn't get a system.
I had a Sega game, Wizard of Oz game, and I think it was from Japan. And I never played the Nintendo one. What was that like?
I just saw a screenshot and some playthrough stuff. And I was gonna say I just didn't want to start like guessing cultures, but the animes or whatever looked like anime from Japan,
Correct.
something from Korea, and something from China.
Okay.
Or an early American has an anime style to their style, doing like a kind of lighthearted version
Like
somewhere
Superbook.
in the 70s or 80s. Couldn't tell by the animation.
It was an Asian arms race with the Wizard of Oz animation, basically.
I'm gonna get bad signal, but does anyone want to go into Kabbalah and gematria of 77 Oz for strength? I know David's not here. Do you have thoughts on this though?
Well, I have a lot of language stuff, but we should just wait till David's around.
I
I
have
know it's
only
like
one thing here in basic numerology for letters. O is 6, and Z is 7. And because I was just thinking earlier about why did the Oz change to QZ, and that would change from 67 to 87. And now you bring up 77, and maybe that's I
right,
don't know.
because Oz is the Hebrew word for strength, which has a value of 77 as Oz itself. And that also plays into iridium, because in Kansas, vanadium and iridium are the 23rd and 77th respectively elements. And the Alvarez hypothesis is that the reset and the death of the dinosaurs and all that is because of the 77th element. and it's also where the largest emerald mine in the world is where there's iridium and vanadium. Vanadium makes a lot of emerald. It's a big ingredient of it.
I have
Also under
that.
Kansas and Missouri is all of this dark fiber. There's all this electricity fiber optic cable that was laid there, and it seems like the most advanced super civilization. There's anything that we have records of tunnel infrastructure for DUMS, military, where they store a lot of these films and things aside from the Kentucky base is in Kansas City on the Missouri state side. And the fact that there's a state border running through the town, like to divide Kansas City, like it had once been too powerful.
I just looked this up, and that the gematria, English gematria of the Wizard of Oz. Can you hear me, guys? Am I being heard?
You're
Yeah.
audible.
For a second, I thought I dropped out. The gematria of the Wizard of Oz, reduction gematria. So, like, what is that one? Like, yeah, it's just like 10 becomes 1, 11 becomes 2, etc. That equals 77 exactly. So that's new to me. So Oz in Hebrew, the gematria is
So Wizard of
77,
Oz, the whole
and
thing, or
the
just
whole
Oz?
the Wizard of Oz
Okay.
equals 77 reduction. So.
Wow. And then Aleister Crowley's book Liber Oz 77.
Yeah. And I was going to bring this up or get into that because that ties it back into 9/11, because Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. Flight 93 hit the dirt.
Isn't there even the MH707, the thing where Andreas wrote the tweets? Isn't that also?
That was 370.
Okay.
But it's 37, 777 kind of the same.
Well, also the London's version of 9/11 was the 7/7 bombing.
7/7 bombing. Yeah, that's true.
The Dow howls.
So the other little ribbon on top here is that ties back to the Wiz, because the Wiz, which features the World Trade Center as Oz, the Wiz movie was based on a kind of Broadway show called The Wiz. That was how it originally came about, and that premiered on the exact midpoint between the death of Aleister Crowley and 9/11. So Crowley's the Wiz, the Dark Wiz. 9/11 is some kind of.
I just don't get how this is amazing. Like exact midpoint.
Yeah, it's weird. And then I connected to the movie's release date, and there's more to it. But like, yeah, that's that simple fact. And so Crowley symbolism on 9/11 is just over the top. Yeah, and it relates to the Wizard of Oz somehow, which is like the most kind of weirdly esoteric part of it all.
The World Trade Center was the doorway, for all the cartoons and everything I contributed and researched. The doorway would not stop being used by usually a villain to bring their forces into this world. However, every time it was the World Trade Center, and it would slightly vary as to what was going on. But like in Ninja Turtles, they had a base set up under the World Trade Center to open the Stargate to Dimension.
Oh, really? It was the World Trade Center? Oh my god.
Yeah,
That's where the Technodrome is, underneath the World Trade Center.
And that's where all the gold was, or whatever that they
The
stole. And
Gargoyles, the Illuminati met there, and G.I. Joe. There was like a evil corporation they almost hit the World Trade Center with a plane, but then there's like 6 other 9/11 things in there. But it goes on forever. But the representation as a Stargate, when you're just watching 90s and 80s kids cartoons, is like they couldn't stop in every series having one episode, or a series where like I'm saying, a series of episodes where a villain slowly takes it over. It becomes a little mini series or whatever, and then you figure out the reason he wants to get the World Trade Center is to open this thing that, when I say technology is like us building an altar for the aliens, whatever, this was really the theme of some of the coolest comic book analysis that Christopher Knowles did at the Secret Sun and into Kirby, but into all early comics, with this repeating theme of the alien saying, let me show you how to build a way for me to come into your world, which is the whole theme of the black and white early Outer Limits run where we got 7 different episodes where a dude builds a device for the aliens to come in, and whether it's military hardware or some guy in a farmhouse somewhere, there's some way of telling. Like in the comic books, it goes from like an artist who starts drawing other dimensions and goes into them or whatever, all the way to some
I just saw that
brain
story.
villain.
I just saw that story last night in our movie I randomly threw on, which was Pixels with Adam Sandler,
Yeah.
where we sent out. Well, first of all, the opening scene is him playing in a video game tournament on July 26, 1982, which is Kubrick's birthday, and I was literally just looking at that day a week ago. Anyway, so that caught my eye. But then the whole point is that so Dan Aykroyd is like the moderator, the NASA guy, the moderator for this tournament or announcer, and then they take the footage of the game and they send it out into space, and quote unquote these moron aliens think that it's a declaration of war, and so they like come back at us with an imitation of our video games that destroy the planet. So it's basically the same idea, right? Like that our culture, our media is inviting an alien response.
I think
Or
it's
Yeah.
funny that Dan Aykroyd called
But they
them
had studied like
boneheads.
our culture. They had
Yeah,
got it
well,
wrong. They
right.
thought the world was the world we built in video games that had like a lot of different simulations of this similar thing. So what it really got out of our culture is like, you guys, you must live in this terrain where these Pac-Man villains are coming at you like 2D. And so there's 3-dimensional characters running around the Earth trying to deal with aliens that only understand a culture of living inside a world of NPCs
And that whole
and tightly construed realm. I mean, the thing about video games is that like yes, it has nothing to do with waking up AI, but yes, I still always play different types of video games, all types, and have all my life. And there's still 2 robots who aren't supposed to be running in the door because I'm over here, and all the robots run at you. It happens every time over, and there's still 2 robots trying to make their way off the screen. Trying to like there's arms flying everywhere, and they're trying to disappear in the rocks. And it's like there's always been phantoms and I considered that early breaks of consciousness in this system we were building. Sorry, it's weird.
Yeah, I just got distracted by my comment. Yes, that is all I talk about is Stanley Kubrick. I apologize. It's in the name.
Oh no, that was
No,
good.
don't stop. Honestly, I think we explained why it matters.
Yeah, for sure.
I was just gonna that DARPA figures into that movie too.
A lot of these people are obsessed in Hollywood with Stanley Kubrick, and they'll make homages to it in and of itself. But the numbers are beyond Stanley Kubrick. It's that he noticed it. He started to try to point it out to people through the movies in a way that he didn't get censored for showing. And there's a lot to be found. I mean, I would say very similar things. When I go look into what happened on a day, first thing I do is look at what happened on that day throughout history. Or what happened in prehistory when they had other days they called that day, right? There's different April 17th in the Roman calendar, different time of the year, but they moved the holiday. Why? What's it really about? Was there a war the same day as there was peace another day? Is there a movie released on the same day as that war? I think it matters. I think they're doing it on purpose.
It's like an objective view at it.
I think that around when Pixel came out and there's another just whole round of films. There was one with The Rock and Justin Timberlake, and it was a musical about the end of the world, and it had Sync overwhelming it. You guys might not remember right now. There's a series of films that I thought at this point, directors had thought it was hip to get into the Sync blog scene and kind of at some point
one hell of a drug. So why not?
I've thought about the extent to which a community into this kind of thing, or me individually, could think myself into thinking these are signs from directors, and how bad of a cave that would be to go down as a human being. But I'm just saying that it's a possibility because I started seeing it so rich after like the number 23 or the movies that we got the hardcore message in Truman or Dark City, but then there was this round of films in the 2000s that was almost like giving the community a wink back with
tongue-in-cheek
direct
thing.
messages. So like as a culture, you could say that Robert Anton Wilson and 42 and all these things, magic and chaos, whatever, all these things have been important to us, right? But I think that's another
When
fundamental.
they build a set and every door at every hotel room or motel or front address is 23 or 237, I mean, it's
Exactly.
or something to that effect, it's kind of hard not to be doing that on purpose. And I think we've talked to enough people working in Hollywood that just think it's hilarious as a prop designer to make the door say 237, that there's no way it's not a conscious effort. It's just how much does it matter? And I think you can find out by looking at Robert Anton Wilson or William Burroughs. Why? I mean, even AI, I wonder about this. When they start having it generate scripts and it says, okay, well, then Sherlock Holmes went to the 23rd Street. And AI is like, you know what that means? Like, there's a certain amount of prescribed notion to the numerology that we already accept in our culture, like a black cat you don't cross the path of.
Yeah, surely. I think that we see the way that hip hop culture was kind of for a few years, everyone, Chris Brown, Rihanna, all these different people who were significant at the time, would be like not only flashing these symbols, but their whole music videos, whatever. The directors that sought them out as artists were directors who went to art school or whatever, and picked up a few things, and other directors who are catering to, can you make it look Illuminati? Can you make it look satanic? Can you make it look like real scary? And so then you started seeing the same sort of thing bend into, I guess, where we were looking in the same place for symbolism. I don't know.
Right. I mean, Wizard of Oz, the Golden Brick Road is almost like the straight and narrow. If you any problem they face is when they get off the road. If you get off the straight and narrow, then all of a sudden you run into trees that try to eat you or something.
What about the red brick road? Because there's a
There's a dualism at the beginning.
She goes
and
down
even
one
in
way.
the
I've always
start,
wondered what's down the other way.
exactly. And isn't it also yellow? Did it have a different color? It looked the same color, no? How did
It's
he
like
even decide?
brick. It's like
Did
red.
they actually talk about it? Because I watched this part and I was like, do they have any information? Couldn't it be exactly the wrong way? How did they know? Why did they go this way? Did they
Yeah.
talk about it?
I don't think
so.
there's
They're
any
just like, go this
information.
way, and she's like, okay.
Yeah,
I'll
but
go
then he
that way.
says go this way, and then he says both ways are fine, and then they start dancing and singing, and then they
Right.
just. And I was really watching. I was like, are they really gonna decide this now? They just walk the one way, and I'm like,
That's
okay.
interesting. I didn't remember.
I think, yeah, that part
So
I
much
wonder
singing, dancing.
is that about the hermaphrodite, Hermes Trismegistus kind of hermaphrodite quality? Because he says some go both ways, and everyone acts like that's a bisexual joke. But is it? Is it not that he's saying like you can be a man or a woman, you can go down the left hand path or the right hand path, and you can still make it. Jeremy for
Choose the
1123.
right-hand path.
Yeah, or maybe go straight instead of left or right. Go straight forwards, I think. Or
I take it as like a Cheshire cat. Like it doesn't matter in the end. I'm sorry, Andreas. I couldn't hear if you were finished, man.
No, whatever. I'm driving.
Okay, so one more time, I'll try. Let's see, Darklight. Can you talk to us?
Hello. You guys hear me?
Yes. Here we
Finally.
are.
Sorry
Perfect.
about earlier. Really happy, first of all, to finally be on. I've been following Xertus for a very long time. And all
Buy
the
the
things-
socks.
everything.
Stoked, man. Well, you're from California. Where in Spain are you now?
I'm in Barcelona. So I was born
Oh,
in
nice.
Barcelona, but I lived in Cali for a long time, like 13 years.
Awesome, man. You also were saying you've been thinking about the Wizard of Oz and something about the Uniform Commercial Code, right?
Exactly. Yes, there's something very interesting about all that regarding the characters. So here's the main thing I wanted to explain, right? The Scarecrow is basically like it's the relation that we have with the corporate fiction that's created for us when we're registered, with our birth certificate. So that's a straw man. And then there's this whole thing that is explained through the UCC. That's for like discharging debts and all sorts of stuff. Like it's not really even debts, just any sort of charge. Like even if it's like a crime, it's all a charge. They're all they're trying to execute it on you. And so basically, the Tin Man is the tax identification number, basically, which I guess would relate to like your social security number, right? And so I guess Dorothy is supposed to like represent each person, which they're like lost in an illusion that's been cast over us. and the lions are like the whole collective of the people, you know, which it's all really funny because I mean, you look at it, it's like what kind of lion needs courage, you know, and Dorothy wants to go home, but she's sleeping the whole time, right? So there's that connection, which is quite interesting if you think about it. You know, the yellow brick road, or like the gold ingots, you know, it's all the gold that was taken from the people. And really, that when they took all the gold from the people, it wasn't even meant for them. It was only meant for corporations, but they duped everybody into giving up all their precious metals, you know. And that's also why Dorothy had silver slippers originally. They've now gone and changed that to ruby, to red, which is like, I guess it was a color that was gonna please the, you know, like the controllers or something.
I think it has to do with precious stones, the wealth, because diamonds have so little wealth except for the value. There's a monopoly. The De Beers family, you know, the control of the diamonds, they can say how much they're worth. And you can do that with precious stones. If you own the mountains where they're being mined, you can say, well, since I own all of them, I'm only selling them at this price this year, right?
It could be that as well, exactly, like silver or diamonds. It's what they had left, I guess. The other parallel that I wanted to draw was basically this thing that just clicked in my head a few months ago, regarding basically the four characters. If you divide the zodiac, so the 12 signs, astrological signs, into four quadrants, I think it's also represented through those four characters. So it seems like two of the quadrants, they want something that they already have, right? Like the Lion and Dorothy. And then the other two quadrants want something they don't need, the Scarecrow and the Tin Man, you know? So, I mean, there's a few different parallels here that can be drawn on. I mean, it's a really interesting topic because if you go searching through the internet, you'll find a lot of different sort of takes on like the symbolism, and I'm sure like most movies, it's so replete with all this sort of symbolism, you know. But I think from what I've been studying regarding UCC, it's definitely like one of the real parallels. And then the last one that I wanted to leave with you guys, I just wanted to make this quick, is I don't know if you guys follow Vortex Mathematics
I was
at
thinking about
all.
that today, actually. Keep
You guys have
going.
heard of it, right? So this is really interesting, dude, because I've been a big follower of that through syncs. You know, since I was a kid, I always started to see like the number 144 and all these like really random places, and then I finally understood like what it is. It's like the number 9, right? And then I got into vortex math and all that, and how it's like the pattern for creation, and I guess it's even in our genetic makeup, I was told recently. And so I was like, researching the UCC code. Sorry, that was redundant because it's like Uniform Commercial Code. But anyway, researching the UCC, I stopped and then I went and looked at the Article 3 and the Article 6 and Article 9. And Article 3 is negotiable instruments, right? Article 6 is bulk sales and transfer and purchases. And Article 9 deals with bankrupt corporations. So that's literally like how the federal government turns us into free energy. Through those three articles.
Those three also represent sort of creation, sustenance, and destruction too, right? That's like that holy trinity of creation.
Exactly.
Also, Oz in New York, the idea of shifting, you know, one letter or shifting one reality, having one persona off from your actual persona, an alias or a something that you're responsible for, like the code. Usually, you know, the Visa card.
Breaking up, bro.
Name with all the rights removed. I don't know if you got that.
We didn't. Just being honest.
Oh, you were breaking up there, Andrew.
Makes you really take
the idea that you have an alias that you're playing, right? And you pay for it and you're responsible for that alias.
Exactly. Well, this is the whole thing, you know, because the federal government, they can't own us, any of us. It's all like public stuff, and we're all in the private, you know, we're all natural men and women, basically. So that's why, because they can't copyright you, they have to take your name, turn it into all caps, so it's now fiction. So that's something that can be copyrighted. It's like a logo or like a trademark, right? So that's the whole reason behind that.
Exactly, and just
It ain't
to add on
Kansas
to that,
anymore.
exactly, ain't Kansas anymore. But so it seems the one dear friend of mine who's also researching Tartaria, Martin Heap, he put forth the proposition that all the Hermetic laws and occult symbolism or whatever, but Hermetic law basically, that may have been used pre-reset to benefit civilization, water purification, cymatics, whatever else we could do, is now purposefully being inverted and used against everyone. And that would just stand to the point, just like you said, Darklight with the 369 and so on, that they use the same road, let's say, but they put their different energy to completely enslave humanity
The red
instead
brick
of having
road.
it in a natural, happy, abundant state, however you want to put it. But they have to
Well,
kind of use the same matrix to even be effective, or the same principles. Yeah.
exactly.
I don't know what you guys can hear me, but the other thing is the idea of the colors. So in the book, obviously, it's not a black and white world, but when they get to Oz, they still see a color that they had never seen before. And this is also because Baum had based his book on the bluebird from Blavatsky's story, and in that, the color blue fills the sky after the storm, and everyone starts seeing blue for the first time. But then they can no longer see the colors that were there before it in the ultraviolet or infrared or whatever. There's like a whole spectrum of that's lost, and so the sky just looks blue. But it used to look like rainbow of galaxies, and it's kind of a veil. So the idea that she's living in a veiled world in Kansas, and then all of a sudden she's able to see more of what's really going on when she gets to Oz.
A horse of a different color.
Well, maybe they really were DMT elves in that case, right? She breaks out of the mundane world and then enters this psychedelic realm where everything is a little bit more realistic and there's more colors.
I think that Baum
Color
really
out of
believes.
space.
I think Baum really believes some of this stuff more than mythologically, and that
Yeah.
part of it is telling the history of Mu to Blavatsky, or Blavatsky's Mu to Lemuria. He's saying, okay, we're at the precipice of Blavatsky's idea for the next generation. She thinks the next evolutionary step will be in Baja or Valencia, California, right? There's going to be the new evolution of man. That was her prediction. He believed it. So there's this idea that he really is looking at the lost history and saying maybe there really was a veil placed over us and that we need to see through.
Maybe the flying monkeys were actually lemurs in that context. And I think in the original book, the Tin Man ends up beheading every single one of those flying monkeys. They came to a much more violent end than they do in any of the movies.
That's a pretty Hellboy end for that versus match. I'm happy with it.
Originally, the Tin Man lost himself, right? Like he lost his heart, and he was in an accident, in a wood accident, and he loses like every major organ of his body. Eventually, like it's cut off, and they replace it with metal until there's nothing left but him and his heart. And then he gives his heart to the homunculus that's created of his corpse, right? So now he's all that's left of the ship of Theseus that was this wood chopping man, and he's given away his heart. So what is he left, right? He's the experiences that have happened. He's the ghost of that man's experience. He's the death of that man's geist.
That's heavy shit.
The Twin Peaks folds into it too because of, I mean, if you're talking about Wizard of Oz and cultural literacy and stuff, that's another kind of place where you find it deeply embedded is Twin Peaks, and of course Twin Peaks, Twin Towers, etc. But so in the Twin Peaks, he names Judy the malevolent spirit, Jiao Day or whatever, and Judy, and then Major Garland Briggs is the guy who's in contact with the owls or the
He's
aliens.
a fucking munchkin.
He's a munchkin?
No, there is a fucking. There's
literally a munchkin. Yeah, you're
Black
right.
Lodge, right?
Dude, we can do owls in a next episode that I can tie to the Oz factor. If you guys want to do that.
You sound like a
now
drug
if you
dealer. Just
want.
said, he was like, "Hey, you want to do this owls thing? You want to do a line of owls and Oz?"
Check out those purple owls and those pink dolphins.
Owlsley, Alistair.
That's the whole plan.
Word.
Perfect.
Hey
So
guys, sorry, I'm gonna just continue as a listener. I'll just leave you with one more tip. Sorry, one more little fact regarding the whole vortex math thing. If you look at the physical circuit, you know, apart from the 369, you have the rest of the numbers. And another thing I found out that was super interesting is like the 2 and the 5, they're the same symbol, just like juxtaposed, and the 4 and the 7 are the same, you know. And then if you put those all together, you get 711, right? 7 is like the number for God, and then 11 the illusion of duality.
And 711 is 2.7 times 3.
And if I'm not mistaken, with the vortex math, it makes a universal hexic.
Yep.
Whatever Crowley was fucking with in the Thelemian
Universal
symbol.
hexagram.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. I'm like, I'm talking out of my element like a child.
Anyway, thank you all, and I look forward to the next time that we.
Yeah, definitely 144 still. It's good to meet you. Let's do this again. I'll talk to you in the Discord soon, and we'll do another. I appreciate it.
thanks for
Appreciate
joining,
you.
man.
Take care, everybody.
See ya.
Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. I have a couple more thoughts I wanted to jump in, but I also want to hear what you guys have to say. The thing I wanted to also bring up in Wizard of Oz is just the amount of, like Raph had said, world changingness like Shakespeare that happened because of the book as well as the movie, that we're now living in a society that we don't realize has shifted. And it's interesting, like the Matrix, because when the Matrix came out, we looked at it the same way, that there's this whole other veiled reality that's so foreign and so alien, but really it's become second nature. And I think that's exactly what Oz was like. It probably seemed foreign and otherworldly until about 1914. And into the 20s, everyone was thinking this is the future of possibility. We can make anything possible, up until the Great Depression, when it was all kind of shut down on them. But it's really an inspiring time for so many people, and it's so interesting that they've cut it out of our civilization. I mean, you've got all these weird versions of the Wizard of Oz that aren't the original Wizard of Oz, and if you look at those books, they're actually pretty inspiring. They help you feel like you can ascend, you can become a more powerful person. You start out playing this little girl that ends up taking over the world, you know?
Carmen Sandiego.
I do love
The other,
Carmen.
the other version of the Wizard of Oz is that a recent one is the one with James Franco, Oz the Great and Powerful, where it's really very more explicitly kind of put in there that the power of Oz is basically cinema, or like projection, light projection technology, which is like kind of an alien technology in this world of the Munchkins or whatever. And they're all just awed and completely taken over easily with that technology. And so that's sort of a point that gets kind of lost in the original film, I think, is that it's all like a recursive sort of metaphor for cinema itself.
I've got a bow to tie on that one too, because I see the Wizard of Oz and a lot of other these huge nostalgic, sort of like lakes that we all go back to and that have affected our grandparents as much as us growing up. They're almost like these cultural batteries where we put our focus on our hopes and our dreams and all of these different theories, right? We lay them on top of this story, and this story outlives all of us, and it keeps getting transferred. And just like you're mentioning, 9/11 or Twin Towers, these all represent these symbols that everyone just keeps investing more and more energy into, so then someone else can come with the power and kind of unleash that energy or multiply it. So another big company comes and they makes a big Wizard of Oz reproduction, or they play on that same kind of archetype. It's that exact premise of magic, right? Where even if you don't understand it or you don't believe it, if you perform the same ritual in the same place as many other people have, you're just bouncing that ball back and forth. You're just, you're adding to those echoes and making that reverberation a little bit stronger. So even if you don't believe it, or even if you make a crappy remake, right, you're still kind of like passing it down to the next person that can invest even more energy into it.
I think it's important to, on some level, agree with it like throughout your being. So if it's genuine, I think the thing you're talking about rehashing a ritual.
Don't be a poser, you're saying? don't fake it exactly.
But
Like,
there is something like the Wizard of Oz. There's no way to ignore that Oz means powerful, the powerful wizard. So kids might see this somehow entwined in the reality. It's like Amazon has a new series about Wizard of Oz, and they're going to continue with the legacy of that, and they'll add new meaning to it because in their playing as a child using their imagination, they're empowering that tulpa with new. And the less they know about the past, that's a question. Is it better? Because the less they're trying to emulate something that's in effigy, and the more abstract that it becomes, the more real and more alive it becomes.
There's no like belief in magic. There's just the charging of the circuitry of older systems of magic or older symbols, and it doesn't have to be old anymore because now we're charging, the cultural relevance of the Wizard of Oz.
it's like metaphors, a thesaurus of metaphor. It seems like the song remains the same. It's always the same thing, but like what you're saying, Frank, the circuitry is layering to such a degree that we can participate with hijacking is a strong word, but we can hack things without even really fully understanding the depths of the circuitry we're a part of.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then it's like, oh, I guess I'm standing on a ley line in Wisconsin or whatever the fuck is going on. I'm in a theater,
and
now
that's
color.
how people who aren't invested or have any knowledge run
still
into
participate
ghosts.
with the magic.
And then people who are looking for ghosts, especially once you get all technology out or whatever, I don't think you're doing the same ritual thing as hearing for hundreds of years. This is a place where things have been
Daniel
weird
Simon, you have
years.
5 minutes to derail. Hurry up and get in here and talk about the Ipsikai. Hurry up. I gave you the Discord link.
What just happened?
I don't know, dog.
The Wizard of Oz just like shat behind the curtain, I think. What just happened?
I sent the link to Simon because Simon said he had something to say about Ipsikai.
Word. Drive-by notice is always legit. It's like, doesn't matter. I might dip out of here in a second. Maybe I should wait 5.
No, we're finishing. We're finishing up now, anyhow. So basically, Alex and Frank, please drop your links. Frank, I found your Facebook. Alex of CryptoK, I don't know the best of your links.
yeah.
Please send it. And then what I'll do just now, just as Andreas does. Here we go. So we got Frank Zero. At least that's your Facebook. God asked me why a temporary profile throws me to Nepal. I really don't know.
That's an ancient weird thing. But I can send you links and
See, that's a layer of the circuitry,
send me a
bro.
link. And
Sure,
here we got Alex of CryptoK, CryptoCubrology at CryptoCubrology on Twitter.
Yep.
And we got Paranoid American.
That's right. And by the way, in issue 3 of Time Samplers, which breaks down Monarch mind control programming, there's a whole panel where they all turn into Wizard of Oz characters.
But of course.
That's awesome.
And then what else we got? We got Team Rabbit Hole, of course, which is Jim's and my podcast. Everyone welcome to check it out as well.
Oh, we're going to have, by the way, everybody on this panel, you all are getting on the fucking show. We're going to crack your brains and figure out who you are. But it's been a pleasure talking with all of y'all and hearing your insights. Fascinating.
You too, Jim.
Fucking paint chips in the Home Depot of reality. What the fuck? Y'all bringing some colors.
If at the very least someone walks away from this discussion more interested in the founding of the Federal Reserve, then this was all worthwhile. You know what I mean?
Yeah, maybe they'll buy Bitcoin too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we're going to do more Wizard of Oz next week. So everybody, think about the Wizard of Oz all week. I hope the audience, you take time to watch.
I was going to do that anyway.
Read some of it, watch some version of it. You can get your iPhone to have Snoop Dogg read the Wizard of Oz to you now. And so whatever you want.
Word.
But think about it a lot because I think we're going to come back to it, especially Zardoz. Zardoz is going to be important next week.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot more. There wasn't enough time to crunch everything in one.
I think it's a lifetime thing.
Oh,
I love you. I love you all.
Peace, man.
It's the eternal journey. Thank you, everybody. Thanks so much.
It's great.
Enjoy yourselves.
Have a good night.